Greetings, transit workers. We're transit workers for a fighting union, and welcome to tonight's installment of our discussions on our 5-point program. Today, we're going to be discussing point 4. So let me just read it in. For Black liberation, down with witch hunts against migrants and refugees. The MTA has run like a plantation, with the bosses segregating us by job title, hammering us with discipline, and keeping us weak. Racial oppression is used to drive down wages and work conditions for all workers, including white union members. Join us in the fight to end plantation justice. This point right here, without a doubt, was the most controversial of all the points that are in this program. This was very obvious when we were out campaigning for our signatures the last couple of weeks. It went everywhere from people just not understanding, like, why are we bringing this up? What does Black liberation or talking about immigrants have anything to do with the union or fighting for anything in their union? Or we'd also would be accused of just being liberal wokeists, or worst case scenario, just being craven opportunists that were just using this to get the Black vote. Well, let me say here, it's none of these things. Us and transit workers for a fighting union, we fight against racist oppression precisely because we fight for the liberation of the working class as a whole. It is an absolute necessity. And here to explain this point, how it relates to our industry in transit, I'm going to leave the floor open. Tom, take it away.
Yeah, definitely. As I was talking to a lot of my coworkers, this was the point in the program that caused the most controversy, and they had specific questions about it. It's funny that in a society that was founded on black chattel slavery, held together with the ideology of white supremacy, and that still has deep-seated racial oppression, which benefits Wall Street, benefits the rulers of this country, that this would be so controversial. But let's face it, there is pressure not to talk about this, precisely because it is such a glaring injustice in this society. But I told all my coworkers, first and foremost, we're a predominantly Black, predominantly immigrant workforce. And because of this, if you look closely, this is one of the main reasons why we're so horribly mistreated, and wages, benefits, protections, and otherwise, safety and otherwise. But we underscored that in order that it's also in the interest of white workers to fight against racial oppression. White workers will never be liberated until there's liberation for Black workers, especially. We emphasize this point precisely because anti-Black racism is so foundational in this society. A little bit later, we're going to talk about the dynamic with immigrant workers. In my workforce, we were involved in the fight to protest the racist police killing of Eric Garner. Yeah. His sister works in my depot. His mother was a train operator. It's just an example of how transit is so part of the lifeblood of this society, and so many examples of racist police brutality do take place down in the subway system. There's brutal. We work together all day, every day, as a very strong, potentially very powerful multiracial workforce. But right after work is over, people go back to segregated neighborhoods, segregated housing, segregated schools. There's police brutality that overwhelmingly affects Black and Hispanic workers, and there's a huge wealth disparity. But the labor movement does have the power to fight against this. It just needs a completely new leadership to do so. And we are that leadership, fighting for the benefit of the entire working class, to weld the disparate parts together. We talked about divide and conquer, or divide and rule. And one of the big themes in New York City Transit is the system of plantation justice. And I know, maybe Richard, you want to talk a little bit about that, what that means.
About plantation justice? Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, being a subway worker, we get, hit in the teeth all the time by 2 Broadway, and I think the reality is that if you want to ameliorate or better our position against discipline, you're going to have to fight against the oppression of Black people, because that is the reason why, especially when compared to other industries that are sister and brother industries to ours, like Metro North and Long Island Railroad. That's the reason why we're treated so horribly, is because we are a mostly Black and Latino workforce. On that topic too, it's another example of how the bosses use divide and conquer to bring down everyone's wages and work conditions. Because if you see how they negotiate our contracts, what they'll do first is they'll try to ram a horrible contract down our throats, and then they'll go over to the Metro North and Long Island Railroad unions, which happen to be mostly white, and say, hey, the subway guys accepted this contract. Why don't you guys accept something similar? So in that way, they really use racial oppression to undermine the conditions of all of us.
That's
so
right.
Yeah, it's, and it's also, I mean, this topic was interesting when I was discussing it with people, because there's an example too of like, okay, if the SMART and Metro North unions and Long Island Railroad union guys are paying attention, they will realize that because of how they use racial oppression, if they want to better their condition, they're going to have to fight against it. So it kind of is an example of how it's in the interest of all workers, especially white workers, to fight against Black oppression. I'm glad you brought up Sister Carr and Eric Garner. I don't know if you want to talk about the OPA committee, if that's a good time.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Transit Workers for a Fighting Union, we've endorsed an important campaign going on in the city and around the country called Open Police Archives. And Eddie spoke at a recent demonstration against the brutal cop murder of Latino, right, in the Bronx, the Dupree family.
Mm-hmm. Eric Dupree.
And these are examples. Of course, racist cop terror is the ultimate example of savage oppression in society, and that's why we take it up. And for example, we make a point that the TWU should be in the forefront of the fight against this. In the case of Eric Garner, they had some demonstration and some small level of support and solidarity with the family, but really the union movement as a whole should take up the fight and try to get open the sealed grand jury files of the Eric Garner case and many, many others. Boy, we could talk all night about the cases. They just mount every single week, every single day in this society. People are being killed, unfortunately, by racist cops. And that's also an issue that labor needs to take up.
Yeah, and Transit Workers for a Fighting Union, we endorse the OPA campaign. And you should look into it. I think we'll probably put like a link in the description or, associated with our Twitter account. But it's an example, and Eddie's speech, you should read it too. It's an example of kind of how we want to take labor power and use it to defend the most oppressed in society, instead of relying on the liberals or relying on the state Democrats. We think that that's a dead end. So,
speaking of special oppression, we should talk a little bit about one of the most depressed groups in New York City today, which is the recent wave of immigrants.
Yeah.
Made me want to take that up because we say down with witch hunts against migrants and refugees. What do you think about that, Eddie?
Yeah, well, it's a very rich discussion, but let me give you just kind of a quick vignette of how this sort of stuff plays out. The other day I was at Stillwell, and we're just using the bathroom, and somebody scrawled on the bathroom wall that all the problems in America are because of immigrants. So I'm just thinking, okay, you have these ladies from Ecuador in the train stations with their kids selling chicles y chocolates, That's the reason America is the way it is? I'm sorry, but I don't know what kind of Kool-Aid you're drinking, brother. But there is literally some places that are still in the dark from hurricanes. Underwater in the Carolinas and Florida and whatnot. And you're blaming immigrants for that? Don't you think it's a question of, I don't know, you know, they got nothing to give the American public but billions for slaughters abroad. I think it's very obvious how they actually use this anti-immigrant bigotry to basically deflect the blame from them and just put it on the most vulnerable people in this society. And oftentimes these people who come into this country are oftentimes the victims of the depredations of the U.S. government. Just take a look at what's going on with the Venezuelan migrants right now. Venezuela has been a target of regime change by the U.S. government, like carrying out, you know, what do you call those? Like what essentially what's been happening with with Cuba, economic warfare against the country.
Oh, embargo.
Yeah, embargoes or whatnot, driving people into the U.S. So, and this is a phenomenon you see like all over the place, and they use this trick. It's the oldest trick in the book. If you look at American history, it's riddled with examples of how they have always used. They've always used the classic divide and conquer. That's a common theme. They'll use immigrants versus the native-born workers and whatnot, but it's always in the service of driving down wages and keeping the working class at each other's throat so that they dare not unite and struggle against who their real enemies are in Wall Street. But I don't know if there's any further
no
thoughts on
doubt.
that.
Well, certainly it's a huge theme in the current political campaign of the Democrats and Republicans whipping up anti-immigrant bigotry. Both parties are equally guilty of doing the exact same thing, and it's all in the service of brutally exploiting new waves of immigrants and keeping us divided against each other so that people don't understand that there needs to be class unity to overthrow the exploiters. And also the trade union bureaucracy, which is encouraging us to vote, just vote for the Democrats, the lesser evil. Well, they are evil. They are on the side of Wall Street. They are doing, you have equally promulgated terror at the borders. And the ruling class of the United States has always turned off the spigot of immigration in order to get successive waves of people to brutally exploit. And we're seeing that now more than ever. That's why we're in the Transit Workers for Fighting Union opposed to both Democrats and Republicans. We're for workers to run the country. And in this upcoming election campaign, we're going to be telling people to vote for the PSL candidates, Claudia and Carino, which is the subject of our next video, I think.
Yeah. It's a lot of food for thought with this discussion. And in the future, we're going to have further videos just taking up a lot of these various issues that we bring up in these videos, especially the topic talked about tonight. But with that, I want everyone to check out our social media, and that's all we got for you tonight. Check out our upcoming videos, and make sure to vote for Transit Workers for a Fighting Union. Good night.
Good night.